The past 24 hours headlines have not been kind to the MBTA, with phrases like no handle on cost, plagued with problems, and simply put, the T got snookered, and that's just about the Green Line extension. Then there's that $7 billion maintenance backlog, a plan to end late night service, and means test all other fares. And soon comes the snow again. Will the T be better prepared this year? Joining me to talk about all this are Jim Aloisi. Jim's the former Massachusetts Secretary of Transportation. Now he's a contributor at Commonwealth Magazine. Good to see you, Jim. Charlie Chipio served on the MBTA's Blue Ribbon Committee on Forward Funding. He's a senior fellow at the Fiscally Conservative Pioneer Institute and a principal of Chipio Strategy. Charlie, good to see you too. Let me start with you. So we learned a month or so ago the estimates on the Green Line extension in Medford and Somerville off by about $1 billion. Now these consultants come out and essentially say the planners are clueless and there's no real budget.
We don't know what it's going to cost.
So is this hyperbole or is this ring true?
Well, I don't think it's hyperbole because, you know, when they announced the initial, well, it wasn't even the initial increase because actually this started out at about 1.4 billion, then it went to 2 billion, and now it's gone to 3 billion.
Or thereabouts, yeah.
So, you know, and even then, some of the members of the Fiscal and Management Control Board were saying, you know, I'm not really confident that we have a handle that it's not going to go higher.
This is the new thing created that
Yes.
Baker wanted to oversee.
And this was when, over the summer when the last increase was announced. So I don't think it is hyperbole.
Were you part of the problem, by the way? I'm just thinking, weren't you Secretary of Transportation during the planning of the Green Line?
I have no doubt some people think I was.
No, I'm serious about this.
Yeah.
Weren't you part of the planning process?
Of course, yeah, but frankly, when I was Secretary, we were saving money by finding ways to deal with some intractable issues. I'm a little bit appalled that the problem has become as serious as it has.
Why a little bit appalled? No real budget, these people say.
No, I think
they don't have a plan. I mean, it is scandalous.
Look, I have said this in Commonwealth Magazine. Joe Aiello, the head of the Fiscal Control Board yesterday, I think said the same thing. People need to be removed from their jobs, people, both public and private sector, set aside, and we need to have people who can restore public confidence in this
Why should the public have any confidence in this thing? If they say, okay, they were $1 billion off, or as you say, maybe more than $1 billion, now we have this consultant report, which everybody seems to acknowledge is legit. If it has been such a disaster so far, and by the way, I want this, it's near my house, I hope it happens, why should people believe it's ever going to be on the right track, so to speak?
Well, right now people shouldn't have any confidence except that it needs to be rebuilt, and I think the process that is hopefully going to go underway now will do that. It's a critically important project. Everyone seems to agree to that. What we need to do now is get the right managers in there to do the job well.
The federal government is contributing $1 billion, and we've
Yes.
spoken to Michael Capuano, who's critical of the congressman. He says it's solid, don't worry. When federal regulators and federal officials hear about this latest consultant report, is any of that money put at risk?
No, I don't think it's put at risk, but I think a lot of questions will be asked, and they're appropriate questions to ask. Look, we have, it's a complicated project. It's no excuse for people dropping the ball. People clearly did. There are other issues involved, like gold plating train stations that should be fairly modest.
But this is really basic stuff, having a budget, having a plan.
And I also wonder going forward, even though I think you're right, I think the money is probably safe, but I mean going forward, you know, in the wake of the big dig, what are the feds going to think about providing federal money for more of these?
You did have something to do with that.
I mean, you know, this
I didn't have anything to do with cost overrun.
You know, speaking of what taxpayers can afford, can we talk about what riders can?
Yeah.
A couple of members of this fiscal control, whatever it's called, the Baker Fivesome, for lack of a better expression, want to emulate what's being done in Seattle. In Seattle, if you're 200% over the poverty line, $47,000 for a family of four. I think it's $23,000 for an individual. You can get fares that are less than half of what the average fare is. Essentially, means testing. Should it be done here?
I would love to see it. The reason I would love to see it is simply because one of the basic things that transportation infrastructure is here to do is to facilitate economic growth. And facilitating economic growth means getting people who are of lesser means, giving them an opportunity to get to job and to make their way up the economic ladder. This is a basic purpose of why we have the T.
Pretty basic to me, too. You for it or no?
Means testing is a terrible idea.
Why is it a terrible idea?
It's very well intentioned, but what it does is it creates a situation where the T is no longer an egalitarian system. Look, we are now in an era.
Isn't this the essence of egalitarianism?
No, not at all.
Pay what you can afford to pay?
We're not looking at the future, and the future is today. We have, for the first time in history, credible private sector funded microtransit alternatives to the T. One of them in Bridge is called Bridge.
A little jitney kind of thing.
Correct, but it's very high end, $3 to $5. It's a fluctuating fee depending on a lot of variables. once you raise fares for the wealthy,
which you would have to do to offset the,
and there's no meaningful differential between the two, so you're basically pushing people who can afford it onto that alternative.
What's wrong with that analysis?
You're left with people who only take the T by necessity. That's a disaster because those people have no voice in the halls of power.
So what's wrong with his analysis?
Maybe that will happen, but I don't think so, because I still think that you're going to have that the T is still going to be a better deal than taking Uber or Bridge or Lyft or any of those kind of things. Even if we're going to have to raise prices a little bit for the for those who are who have more means. But I think it also gets to why the fundamental thing the T has to do is to transform itself away from what it is now into a customer service agency, because that's what's going to keep the wealthier people there.
How does Charlie Baker, who is against graduating the income tax, ever allow his board, this 5-person board, to essentially graduate the cost of riding on the T?
I'm not sure you can equate taking a ride on the T with the income tax. I mean, I'm no expert on the graduated income tax either way. That, of course, is your area.
Only lost that one 71 to 29. I know what you mean. Yeah.
But I think that they're different, and I just think, as I said, I just think this idea of providing access to economic growth is so important.
I don't even know why we're talking about a fare increase, period. In a state that just said no to an inflation adjustment on the gas tax, after the last winter we had, with the kind of service that we get, why are we even talking about a fare increase?
Who's paying for the multi-billion-dollar debt service, the multi-billion-dollar maintenance problem?
Not fares. And here's the thing.
Who's paying for it?
You do a 5% fare increase, you're going to raise maybe $23 million. We have admittedly, by their own admission, $7 billion state of good repair need. We need a comprehensive plan. I've called for things like transferring debt. I've called for transferring some portion of the highway fund to transit. You need to free up several $100 million to make a dent.
And fares should not be the vehicle. I want to talk about winter just for a second. It's only a minute or two left. Mass Inc. did a poll. 28% of the public thinks T service is better this year. More significantly, only 37% think we are prepared. The T is prepared to handle a winter like last winter. Charlie Baker says my $83 million winterization plan is going to do the trick. Who's right, Jim Ellison?
I think Baker's right. I think they have focused on the right things. They have focused on the right kinds of infrastructure in terms of both the commuter rail system and the red and orange lines. They didn't have 40 new locomotives for commuter rail last season because they were all delivered defective. They will have them online this season. So the combination of new locomotives and the pretty targeted smart investments they've made, I think is going to be what we need to get past the
Would you feel better if we erased this portion of the tape, or are you pretty confident?
No, I'm confident.
You are. How about you?
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, they're, I think, as well prepared as an organization that has a $7 billion maintenance backlog and is essentially bankrupt and its equipment is way too old, can be, given those realities. I think they are in far better position than they were last winter.
One last thing, we only have 30 seconds left. I am obsessed and a big supporter of late night T service. Shirley Leung just did a piece and said, in the wake, in anticipation of maybe it being dropped for the second time, which I think is a horrible mark on the city, $13.38 subsidy for late night service. Why shouldn't the rider pick up a more significant share of that and keep it alive?
Because who's riding it? It's not only wealthy people out on a late night spree. The people who are riding late night service are people like waitresses.
Right, it's cheaper than a cab for them, though, isn't it?
Well, I know, but look, if we're going to have a system that works for people, let's have this.
So should we kill late night T?
No, we should keep it. It's less than a rounding error in the course of things. We need to focus on the ball. The ball is called a $7 billion state of good repair gap. Eliminating late night service is
10 seconds. How do we pay for it?
One of the many things, priorities. We are in such bad shape here financially. We've got to set priorities. That is one of the many things that should change and should go immediately.
I feel a lot better. Jim Aloisi, good to see you. Charlie Chivio, you as well. Don't forget, we're not the only ones who've had to figure out how to keep a mass transit system going in piles of snow. But as you may have seen in this video out of Canada that went viral during the MBTA winter disaster last year, some have it far better figured out than we do.